tradition. When someone passes away, we must have a funeral and the burial as soon as possible. So we apologize that we were not able to give many of you an opportunity to say goodbye. So instead, we wanted to invite you here today to remember him and celebrate his life with us, and to give your final farewell in a place that he held very dear to his heart. My father was very involved in our spiritual community, and he worked to provide the facilities and support for others to the best of his ability. After helping to construct the first Daily Bora Mosque in Illinois, he worked tirelessly to unite a second congregation in the northwest suburbs in a spiritual place that was closer to their homes. It was in this markaz where we are today that he led the Northwest Jamaat in prayers during the holidays, weddings, and other important community events. And it was in this very room that he conducted his final prayer. It was a Friday, the most auspicious day in our spiritual tradition, when he led the evening namaz prayer for our community at a wedding event. After prayer, he had sat down in the next room, just over there, with friends discussing politics, laughing, and smiling. And then suddenly, he collapsed. We think that he suffered a cardiac arrest before passing away. After doctors in our community, paramedics, and the ER staff tried their very best to save him, we had to accept that his life had come to an end. To many of you, he was a dear friend who touched your lives in different ways. Today, we would like to remember what his life meant to us, sharing stories and reflections to honor a life well lived.
If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you, if you can trust when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too, if you can wait and not be tired by waiting or being lied about, don't deal in lies, or being hated, don't give way to hating, and yet don't look too good nor talk too wise, if you can dream and not make dreams your master, and if you can think and not make thoughts your aim, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two impostors just the same, if you can bear to hear the truth you've spoken, twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools, or watch the things you gave your life to broken, and stoop and build them up with worn-out tools, if you can make one heap of all your winnings and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss, and lose and start again at your beginnings, and never breathe a word about your loss, if you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they are gone, and so hold on when there is nothing in you except the will which says to them, hold on. If you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings nor lose the common touch, if neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you, but none too much, if you can fill the unforgiving room with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it, and which is more, you'll be a man, my son. This is a poem by Rudyard Kipling, and some will know it. It's called If, and he wrote it thinking of his son. And I like to think about Dad sometimes telling me that poem. For those of you who know my dad closely, you'll know that he experienced a lot of the things in that poem. He went through a lot of ups and a lot of downs, never complained. And he certainly taught me, I think, how to be a man. But I look back now and know that not only did he teach it, he definitely lived it. He did so many things. And you guys, all of you, from so many different walks of life, and so many different cultures and communities, I think are a testament to all the lives he touched. I really thank you guys for being here. One of the things, oh, by the way, my sister's a lot smarter than I am and a lot more prepared, so she has some prepared notes. I'm going to be a little extemporaneous here, and if I tear up a little bit, remember
remember with me the beautiful things he did, because that's what I'm remembering as I do it. Sarah mentioned that when Dad passed, he did something that very few people get a chance to do. He did something he truly believed in. He was here and he was praying. His religion meant quite a lot to him in his final years, and he actually led that prayer. Something I've learned in this last 1 week as well, as I've been getting together with people he worked with and learning from the people he's worked with. He also had an incredible day at the office. He was telling everybody about how this was it. They've done it. They have incredible momentum. And I felt that in the last few years as he was building up his momentum in his business. And I truly believe he left on a high note. And I want to remember him on that high note. He had a lot to share. He had so much wisdom about business, about religion, about politics, but mostly about people. Unlike many people, he didn't network. He never networked. Networking is when you talk to somebody and you just meet them and now you've got a business card. Dad didn't do that. Dad had connections. He had relationships. He met you, he really connected with you, he bonded with you. And you always knew somebody. I remember him once coming back from a trip, and he was carrying what looked like a miniature Japanese house. And I'm thinking, I know you meet exotic people, Dad, but what is this? What did you just bring home? He'd come back from Seoul, from the capital of Korea, and he had met some ministers there. Dad doesn't know Korean. I don't really know how many Korean people Dad knew. But somehow, he had made some great connections and met the president of Korea. That's right. Not the ministers. And I think he did that with everyone, big and small, kings and crowds alike. I think he really encouraged all of us to dream. He encouraged all of us, no matter who we were, no matter what we were doing at that moment, no matter what we believe in. He encouraged us to really struggle and fight for the things we cared about. He supported me so much. Even now he's gone, and every single person I'm meeting is telling me how much he talked about me and Sarah, how much he cared about us, and how much he had belief in what we're doing. And it's incredible. He figured out how to support us after he was gone. Always told me I was smarter than him. Still learning from him. Told me I'd be more successful. I'll be really lucky if I have half as many plaques by the end of my life, I think. It's funny, I think we all compete with our fathers in some way. We all wonder, can I do better? Somehow Dad finished his master's in his early 20s, went to a foreign country, built a business on his own, got integrated into the Indian community here in Chicago, brought Bollywood from India here with so many Indian leaders. It's so much, and I think it'll be hard for me to ever think about competing. And so I think instead many times of what would he do, how would he act, how would he behave. And the things I remember most, the things that I've had a chance to work with so many people, and the things that I think really separate him from all the people I've met, all the people I've worked with, all my friends, is his positivity. You could never meet the man and not get a solution from him. I see a lot of nods. And he always had a really great idea that he was working on, and something he was really excited about. I'm gonna miss him a lot. And I want to also encourage you all as we're thinking about him, to think about what he inspired you to do. Think about the stories that you shared with him, the laughs. And I'm going to give you a little bit of homework. All the people who work with me know I give a lot of homework. During your time here today, it's going to be very easy to feel sad and to miss him, to feel sorry for me, to feel sorry for my sister and my mother. But I'm going to ask you to do something a little bit harder. I'm going to ask you to remember a story. Remember something that he did for you. Remember something that he taught you, whether it was through an action, whether it was through something he said. And I'll ask you to share it with two people. Share it with one of the three of us, or my uncle, or my aunt, and pick one of us, and then also share it with somebody in this room you don't know. Remembering him is very important to us. Thank you.
So, it was a devastating loss for all of us. For me, I lost my biggest cheerleader, my most enthusiastic supporter, my closest friend, and the best dad in the world. Dad was so ambitious, he was so brilliant, and he was so charismatic. He made a respectable name for himself in any community he entered. He built 2 huge companies, a mosque, hundreds of homes, and thousands of strong relationships. He used to tell me how he came to be where he was. He was only 20 years old when he decided to pursue his version of the American dream. He was leaving his home in India to become a civil engineer and a young entrepreneur. After graduating at the top of his class at Pune Engineering, he hopped on a plane to Chicago without knowing anyone in the United States, determined to make a meaningful life for himself in a new country. Like homes, bridges, and nuclear power plants, my dad knew how to build strong friendships and make them last. He quickly found roommates and best friends at the Illinois Institute of Technology, and integrated himself into a growing network in Chicago where he would be respected for the next 3 decades. He became an assistant teacher and then got his first job at Sargent & Lundy as a civil engineer to support himself financially and pay for his education. But he used to tell me that he always knew he could never be anyone's employee. He started buying buildings, renting them out, and before he knew it, he was knee-deep in what would become a real estate empire that he would build in Chicago. He called it Polo Builders, and it developed hundreds of homes across Chicagoland, including the homes where I spent my childhood. And even when financial hurdles shook the foundation of his first company, he remained enthusiastic and built a new real estate brokerage from scratch, which would become known as American Real Estate. Yet with all of his professional commitments, he somehow also managed to provide valuable support to our spiritual community. He used his expertise in real estate development to help him construct the first mosque for the Dawoodi Bohra Muslim community in the Chicagoland area. He worked tirelessly on the project to ensure that the building fulfilled zoning and religious regulations, soliciting permission from both legal and spiritual experts, and encouraging parties to collaborate in order to complete the project. In honor of his efforts, he was given the title Sheikh, to recognize him for the respectable contribution to his spiritual community. Even after the establishment of the mosque, he didn't stop serving our community. When he realized that a large group of individuals were unable to commute the long distance to our mosque, especially each day during the holy month of Ramadan, he helped organize a second congregation in the northwest suburbs of Chicago. And when the community in the northwest Chicagoland awaited the appointment of a permanent local spiritual head, he took responsibility in the interim. He led prayer, and he helped manage the financial and political tasks necessary to support the members of the community. My dad was a big dreamer, a big thinker, and a big leader. But more than all of that, he was the best dad I could ever ask for. Every time he'd pick me up from the airport, especially after a long trip abroad or on my way home from college, he would hug me tightly and say, "I love you, Sada Beta. You were my life, my world, and a piece of my heart." I would tell him about everything that was on my mind in that moment, and he would grab my hand and tell me how happy he was to see me. He was always so affectionate, so loving, and so willing to help me whenever I needed anything. In middle school, I would chronically oversleep and sheepishly shuffle into his room to wake him up after missing the bus so I could ask him to take me to school. He would rub the sleep from his eyes, and he would kick his legs out from under the covers without even a second thought, and he would just roll out of bed after only several hours of sleep so that he could take me to school. His willingness to sacrifice his time for me continued well into college. When I was trekking back to my dorm, from the library through the mountains of snow, against icy gusts of wind, wondering if I would succumb to the pressures of midterms and exams, I knew I could call my dad to work through any crisis, whether petty or existential. He never missed an opportunity to tell me that he loved me, that he was proud of me, and that he knew I was going to do big things someday. And when I was home for the holidays, we would linger in the kitchen for hours after meals, chatting about anything that came to mind. Our conversations would tackle everything from politics in the Middle East, to religion, to gender norms, or even normative philosophy. It made no difference that our upbringings and our perspectives were often anti-parallel. He was such an open-minded, intelligent thinker that he could spot the kinks in my arguments immediately, while accepting those that were better constructed, regardless of how different they may have strayed from his worldview. Yet, he was consistently patient with me. He listened to me even when I was wrong, admitting his own shortcomings, but then gently reminding me that he had accumulated several more decades of wisdom than I had. My dad didn't constrain himself to the humorless intellectual, though. He would transform into a comedian without warning. In fact, he spent most of his time with me joking, smiling, and being silly. I remember disconnecting the wireless router for less than a minute one time just to reset my laptop's connection to the network, and having him look up at me, almost serious, and asking, "Beta, when are you going to college again?" Whenever I teased him back, he loved to crinkle his eyebrows, squint at me with his hands on his hips, and ask me, "Do you like to give me a hard time?" Even on his last day, he kept me smiling. I was hurrying down the hall when he came home, and he intercepted me with a massive hug. When I told him I'd been rushing to the bathroom, he replied, "Oh, I thought you were rushing to give me a hug because you were so excited that Dad was home." I last saw him smiling at me from across the room, sitting on our couch, telling me that he would see me later at the religious event later that evening. I was proud to hear his voice over the speakers as he led evening prayer later that night. I watched our congregation complete namaz in unity.